Hey YouTube, and welcome to my Google Nexus 7 versus the iPad mini made by Apple comparison video. This comparison video is being made for you to have an informed decision about which small form factor tablet is the best buy for your hard-earned cash. The iPad mini features a 5 megapixel camera, and you can see the mute switch and the volume rocker switches there on the left side. And on the front, you will be greeted with a HD FaceTime camera for FaceTime and Skype. And on the top, you will get a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. You will see the microphone for audio recording and the power lock switch. On the opposite side, you see absolutely nothing. And on the bottom, you will see that familiar home button and the new Lightning port. The iPad mini features an all-metal construction chassis with beveled edges, and you can see the design language is carried over from the iPod Touch 5th generation and the new iPhone 5. Now let's talk about the Google Nexus 7 manufactured by Asus. You will see the power button and the volume rocker switches on the right side, and on the top you will see the HD front-facing camera. And you will see the 4-pin connector for accessories on the left hand side, and on the bottom you will see a USB 2.0 and a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. Now you can see that the iPad mini is definitely thinner than the Nexus 7, but they're both pretty small devices, and I don't think you'll have a problem holding them in the hand. But if you're about thinness in your tablet and you're wondered by thinness, then for sure the iPad mini will be the tablet for you. The Google Nexus 7 features a rubberized back, while the iPad mini has a metallic back. And you will see that the Nexus 7 has a single speaker, while the iPad now features dual speakers on the bottom. Now let's talk about the hardware specs of the iPad mini. It comes with a dual-core A5 processor, 512 megabytes of RAM, a 5 megapixel rear-facing camera, and an HD front-facing camera. It comes with iOS 6.01 preloaded with a premium metal build and available LTE. And this one is a 7.9-inch IPS display and has a resolution of 1024 by 768, which equals 163 ppi. No Retina display here, folks. And this comes at a price of $329 for the 16GB model, $429 for the 32GB, and $529 for the 64GB, and add $130 if you want the 4G LTE connectivity. The Google Nexus 7 features a quad-core Tegra 3 processor, 1 full gigabyte of RAM, an HD front-facing camera, 4.1 stock Android, which is amazing, comes with a primarily plastic build, and it has available HSPA Plus for 3G connectivity. This one is a 7-inch IPS display with a resolution of 1280 by 800, which is an HD resolution, and it has 216 ppi. And this one comes in an amazing price of $199 for the 16GB model and $249 for the 32GB model, and a $299 32GB plus HSPA plus 3G. Now here's a look at the two screens close up. The Nexus 7 is on the right and the iPad mini is on the left. With the higher pixel per inch density of the Nexus 7, you can tell that the Nexus 7 is a little clearer than the iPad mini on the left. Now let's get to performance of these two tablets. Here I'm going to run Geekbench 2 since it is a cross-platform benchmarking tool, and this will show us how fast the processor and the memory and things are working together on new hardware. Now, really benchmarks aren't everything, but it shows you here that 1392 on the Nexus 7 against 753 of the iPad mini. So the Nexus 7 is about twice as fast on the Geekbench 2 benchmark. So you're probably asking yourself, what's the real world performance of these two tablets? Well, let's look at some web browsing here and let's hit go at the same time. They're both on the same Wi-Fi network, and you can see that they finished about exact same time. The pinch to zoom is extremely responsive on both devices. The scrolling is good on both devices as well. I don't think that one of them really performs better than the other. In my testing, I think they're both well performing devices. And I can show you a little more with the home screens here and the launcher. And you can see that the Nexus 7 is extremely responsive with that Project Butter on Android 4.1. And the iPad mini is also responsive on iOS 6. So you can see here that the touch response is very, very good on both devices. And the touch screens are very, very nice. So I don't think you'll have any problems with that at all. Now you'll have to decide between Android and iOS platforms on each of these tablets. They both feature a lot of the same features, but you can see that the Android operating system has a more robust notification system where you can flick across single ones and you can expand, collapse. You can do a lot of different things on Android. And I really think that the Android operating system is definitely ahead of the iOS 6 system, where you can see here where your app drawer is congregated and also your widgets are there. And if you're not familiar with what widgets are, they're like live apps on your home screen where you do not have to open the app, it's quick access. So here is the Gmail client where you can look at your email right on your home screen without jumping into it. And I think that is fantastic, where iOS is missing a lot of those software features. Now, where iOS really wins here is the app ecosystem. The apps themselves really aren't that much different that are available, but the iPad has the advantage where that there's a lot of tablet optimized apps for the iPad. So let's open Facebook on both. And if you look, the Android operating system one is basically just the phone mobile OS blown up into a bigger screen. And if you put it into landscape mode, you'll get exactly the same thing. It's just basically the phone version scaled up to a 7-inch screen, in which there's nothing wrong with that. And it works okay, but it's not any different for the tablet than it is for maybe your phone. But here on the iPad, if you flip it to landscape, you can see now there's a friend list on the side with searches, and it really takes advantage of the larger screen, which I like. Twitter is pretty much the same. There's different tablet optimized programs for the iPad, and I think that makes it more of an enjoyable experience. Now, holding the iPad mini can be a little difficult. It's very, very light, but has a really thin bezel on the sides. Now, it really doesn't feel that bad in the hand, but if you're really worried about your thumb hitting the screen, don't worry about that, because 6.01 now has finger rejection. So you can have that finger right on the screen and no problem, it will not block the touch response at all. But it is really thin on the bezel, so it kind of feels better with the touch cover, and even though it's really thin, it's also very wide. So a lot of people with small hands will not be able to fit this in one hand. So that is something to consider when you're buying the iPad mini. The Nexus 7, on the other hand, though, is a 7-inch screen, so it's not as wide, and the bezels are much larger on the side. So it's a lot easier to hold in one hand and actually operate the thing in portrait mode. So, and it feels good in the hand. It's definitely heavier though. It's definitely bulkier than the iPad mini, but even in landscape mode, it's very, very comfortable to hold, and it is operational with one hand. So I like that. The feeling of the Nexus 7 is actually better in the hand for me, for my personal taste. I think it feels good. It's got a little bit of heft to it, so it feels good in the hand, and the operation with one hand is definitely a plus with the Nexus 7. Now, the Nexus does have this rubberized textured back, and it does feel good, and I think that's going to be a preference for a lot of people, where the iPad is an aluminum finish on the back, but it is definitely a fingerprint magnet. But the iPad itself definitely has a premium feel to it, and I think you will know it's definitely a more expensive product. Now, we'll have to see how the scratches and stuff hold up versus the iPhone 5, since it's made out of the same material. But you can definitely feel the premium build quality of the iPad mini versus the Nexus 7. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Now, the Nexus 7 uses Google Now, and the iPad mini uses Siri for its voice dictation and assistant service. So let's take a look at some of these.
What's the weather like? It's 82 degrees and clear in Spring Hill.
2 different temperatures, weird.
How high is Mount Everest?
Mount Everest is 29,029 feet tall.
I found this.
I like Google Now how it has the picture and it also voice dictates the results.
What's the movie The Matrix about?
Which one? Something about reality and black clothing.
It's really up to you which one you like best. They both have good voice dictation and they both do a little things better than each other, but in the end they get the job done. So really you have to ask yourself, which operating system do you like? I mean, do you like Android 4.1? Do you like the openness? Do you like the tweakability? And do you like the fast OS updates and innovation at this point? Or do you want something that's familiar, fast, has a great app ecosystem, and that you know is going to work well under whatever conditions? And that's something you really have to ask yourself. Now, if you're really looking for build quality, I think the iPad mini is the one for you. It is extremely thin. It is beautiful. Apple really knows how to make hardware. And I think you will appreciate it if you're a hardware lover, the iPad mini. And it also has a 5 megapixel camera on the back, which the Nexus 7 does not. And the Nexus, it's also a great tablet. It feels good in the hand. It is made of some decent materials. It doesn't feel that cheap in the hand whatsoever. And the price point is absolutely amazing for what they are actually offering here. So you will have to definitely look at the both of these tablets and really ask yourself, which one do you want? The iPad mini definitely had better battery life than the Nexus 7 did. I was able to use the iPad mini all day, games, web surfing, everything, and it really amazed me. Now the Nexus 7 has pretty good battery life too, but I found myself charging it at night when I was using it all day. I was able to squeeze 3 to 4 hours more out of the iPad than I was with the Nexus 7. So once again, I think really it's a toss-up between the two, but if I had to make a personal decision for myself, I would go with the Nexus 7. The Nexus 7 is much, much cheaper. It has a fuller feature set, especially with the HSPA Plus and 32 gigabytes for $300. That is a very, very good price. Now, the iPad mini is definitely not a bad tablet whatsoever, and I think if you love iOS and love hardware, you will definitely not be disappointed with the iPad mini. But I think personally that the Nexus 7 is a better choice on hardware, software, and price point. So what do you guys think? You like the iPad mini? You like the Nexus 7? Comment in the comments below. Hit thumbs up like crazy and subscribe to my channel.